Hi, I'm Sonya White Jaguar, and welcome to my semi-monthly video series, White Jaguar Wednesdays, where I discuss spiritual subjects inspired by your questions. So I recently released my first book, a free book on Wattpad titled From Actor to Healer, Alan Rickman's New Life as a Spirit Guide. And a couple of people have come to me, and two people who didn't know each other, and they asked me the same question. They said they were very intrigued by the story, and they were impressed with how Alan was interacting with me so directly. They said, it's amazing. He's tapping you on the shoulder, and he's displaying his personality. He has a sense of humor, and he cares about you, as a person. He cares about humanity, and he's become a spirit guide. And they said to me that they were raised in a tradition that had explained the afterlife differently. They said that they were taught that after death, the soul basically moves on somewhere to some place that's completely separate from the physical world. And the soul no longer cares about this dimension and no longer has the desire, to interact with people here. And so that's what I'd like to talk about today. These two people were basically asking me, what is the nature of the soul? And so that's what I'd like to talk about. What exactly is the soul, and what happens to the soul after death? Now, I need to preface by saying that I am by no means an expert in the soul. I'm a physical person, just like everyone else here. And, we come into, these lifetimes here on Earth to experience, obviously the Earth plane, and other planes of existence are much harder, for us to access, because of course that's why we're here. We're here to experience this dimension. But we can experience these other dimensions, indirectly, through meditation, and people have lots of different experiences that they've reported, and of course, there's a lot of material, out there, so what I would like to draw from in discussing the soul is actually an ancient source, an East Indian source called the Vedas. Some of you maybe are familiar with the Vedas. And the Vedas explain the soul, I think, in a very succinct way that's fairly easy to understand. They break it down into three main aspects. Now, maybe you've been trained in another tradition where you were taught that the soul has 5 aspects or 7 aspects or another number, and that's perfectly fine. I like the Vedas description of 3 aspects because it's fairly simple, and for someone who maybe has not heard this before, it'll be a little easier to understand. So how do the Vedas describe the soul? So they break it down into 3 bodies: the physical body, the astral body, and the causal body. Now, the physical body, of course, we all know what that is. That's exactly, what I'm using to communicate with you. I'm using my physical vocal cords, right? We know what the physical body is. But what about these other 2 bodies, the astral and causal bodies? So these are aspects of the soul that we cannot experience directly, with our 5 physical senses here. So what are they? So the astral body basically is what we would call the subtle energy body. Those of us who do energy work, that's what we're doing. We are tuning into the subtle energy body. So when we take a pendulum and we're testing, the chakras, for example, to see if they're open, if there are any blockages, if we need to send healing to the chakras, that's the subtle energy body. The aura, the meridians, that's all part of the subtle energy body, which is housed in the astral body. And that's also where our thoughts and emotions lie. And now the causal body, that basically represents our connection to all that is. So that's our connection to the Creator, to the cosmos, to the earth, to other human beings, to the animals. And it's also where our past life memories are housed. So in a nutshell, that's basically how the Vedas explain the soul. And so the point is that when the physical body dies and then the soul moves on to the next dimension, it is the astral and causal bodies that remain intact and move on. So in other words, what we take with us are the subtle energy body, the chakras, the aura, our thoughts and our emotions. And of course, from the causal standpoint, it's our connection to all that is. And of course, our past life memories. So that's why Alan is able to interact with me and others so directly, because his astral and causal bodies have remained intact. And that's why he cares. And I will also add here that these people had asked about working on the deceased. They were not aware that you could work on deceased people. And they had said, how is that possible? And so this also explains how it's possible to work on deceased people. I've been doing energy work for close to 20 years now. And I was taught very early on in my training that we could work on our deceased loved ones. And this is exactly why, because they still have a chakra system, they still have emotions and memories and so forth. And so they might have a need, for some healing to help them with their transition. And these two people who were asking me about the book, they also had said to me that they were under the impression that immediately after death, the soul enters a very peaceful, blissful state, and where there's just no more pain, no more concerns, and so there is nothing in need of healing, in other words. So why work on someone, who has passed if they truly don't need healing, right? And so all I can say is, based on my experience as a healer and my experience with Alan, that's just not always the case. Certainly Alan, still had some fear immediately after his death. He was not ready to cross over. In fact, it wasn't until I gave him the Reiki attunement that he then finally, crossed over. Of course, that was unbeknownst to me that he needed healing. But that's something to keep in mind, especially if you are a spiritual healer, that, I recommend following, whatever guidance you receive. If you're guided, to work on someone after they've passed, then pursue that. But basically, that's what I wanted to talk about, today, is the nature of the soul and exactly what survives death, and how is it that our loved ones, and other people who've recently transitioned, how is it that they can continue to interact with us? And it's because of the nature of the soul. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to comment below, or email me at sonya@sonyawhitejaguar.com, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Please go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time.